Running in the winter is really difficult. Winter running feels like you're on a completely different planet sometimes. The texture that you're running on, the clothes you have to wear, even the air that you breathe in feels different. Every little thing about this, it just becomes a little bit more difficult. But yet you're out here trying to get better. If we didn't run in the winter, then we wouldn't be ready for the spring and the summer when it's time to run outdoors as well. These are the runs that truly test us. Cold running is hard enough. So today I want to share 8 tips on making running in the winter just a little bit better. All right, so before we get into the 8 tips here, we'd have to answer the question, why would you want to run in the cold in the first place? If it's so cold, if it's so miserable, why would you run? So just to rewind a little bit, I ran my first marathon last year, and when I was done with it, all I wanted to do was run another one. So later this year, I have a couple marathons scheduled, but I didn't want to take November through February off. That's a lot of months of not running. And I remember the feeling of being a new runner and how difficult it was to just run like 2 or 3 or 4 miles. But then I remember the feeling after training for weeks to be able to run 11 or 12 miles and it not feel that difficult. So I really didn't want to start over. My only options at that point were spend the entire winter running at Planet Fitness on treadmills, which I did not want to do. I don't like treadmills necessarily. Or the other option is just take the season off and just consider it like an off season, if you will, and not run at all. Both of those did not seem like very good options, so I decided it was time to run in the cold. So I'm giving this information to you not as an expert, not as somebody who knows all, or I'm not trying to teach you. I'm giving you this information as somebody who needed to answer these questions for himself and now wants to share that with you guys, so you can basically take these tips and apply them to your own running journey. And if you run in the cold or you're in a Midwest or northern state, maybe these things will really help you out, okay? So let's start with tip number 1, start slow and start cold. You're gonna get out there and you're gonna be freezing cold. So your natural instincts are to go out the gates and just run as fast as you can and do your fastest mile first. But that's really gonna be the worst thing for you. Just because you're cold does not mean you need to go out there and just take off sprinting and wear yourself out. You're gonna be sucking in a lot of cold air. It's gonna be a lot on your lungs and your body right away. The best thing you can do is start slow. Take like an extra minute on that first mile, maybe more, knowing you can warm up and pick it up later, but you don't wanna go out there ice cold and just sprint. Starting cold is really important too. This is some advice that I read that really helped me because I was preparing to run in the middle of January in Ohio. So it was, I think, 24 degrees. It was freezing cold. I read some advice online that said start cold. So what they meant by this was actually start the race feeling cold. Don't dress for the weather and feel good out there, because a couple miles in, you're gonna be sweating, you're gonna be wishing you could take those layers off, and it's gonna be pretty complicated. What I did to start cold is I put some running tights on or spandex on underneath, and then I put my running shorts on, a shirt, and then I just put on like a windbreaker. The other important thing I had on was a hat to at least cover my ears, and get yourself a pair of running gloves. I got some running gloves that you can like touch your phone with as well, which is nice for changing music or using Strava, or if you're me trying to take pictures or videos mid-race. But those are really important to get. You can find some on Amazon for fairly cheap. I don't recommend a certain brand. Just get something that keeps your hands warm and lets you still use your phone if you need to do that. Not that, yeah, you should probably just run, but I like to use my phone. All right, tip number 2 is actually hydrate. So for me, when I get out in the cold weather, the last thing I want to do is drink a bunch of cold water. In fact, I'd rather just drink a hot coffee before I leave and just call it. But the problem is you do get dehydrated pretty quick because you're so cold and you're still sweating, you don't realize you need fluids as much, but you do. So the logical sense here is if you don't want to drink cold water, don't. So I just leave my Brita filter out. I drink room temperature water, which probably doesn't sound the best, but it does feel better on my body and on my muscles. I feel like they don't have to warm up as much if I just drink warm water. Also make sure you're drinking electrolytes. I have some as well. If it's under 4 miles, I probably won't drink any, but anything above that, or if I'm sweating a lot and it's really hot, I always drink electrolytes. Tip number 3 is warm up indoors. Don't go out there when it's freezing cold and then start jumping around and running around and getting out of breath. If you're at your apartment or your house, warm up there, do some stuff there, some stretching, some mobility work before you go out, and you'll feel much better than if you didn't. Tip number 4 may sound a little bit weird, but it made a lot of sense to me, and that's run your first couple miles with the wind at your back. When you get out of your car and you're really cold and you start running, The last thing you want to do is have your first couple miles with wind right in your face. Your face is going to get cold, your ears are going to get cold. For me, my jaw starts to hurt a little bit too. And then you're going to be breathing in all that cold air in your lungs, and you get that nasty lung burn feeling that nobody likes. I found the best way to avoid this is not by covering my face up with a mask or something, because then I feel gross as I'm like breathing in my own CO2, but I actually just turn my back to the wind and let it carry me for the first couple miles. But I end up running an oval, so either way I come back around, but by the time I have to run into the wind, I'm warm enough that it doesn't bother me as much. Tip number 5 is just a short one, but I found this one really interesting. When I went on my 10-mile run in January, I brought 2 gels with me, but by the time I took one, I think it was mile 4, it was actually completely frozen, and I did not expect that. I figured if it was in my pocket, like next to my legs, it would stay warm for my body heat, but it did the opposite. It completely froze. So I had to take my glove off, and I was trying to hold my glove under my armpit and then open up the gel, but it was totally frozen. So I was trying to like break it up a little bit and then warm it up with my hands. My hands were getting sticky, my gloves were getting sticky. It was just a disaster. So maybe stick for something like salt shoes. I had those for my marathon and I really liked those, or do some like those honey stinger gummies. That's another good option. But you can still bring gels, maybe just have it in your car, which seems weird, or have it in the first or second mile. But if you're gonna do a longer run outdoors, realize it may freeze. Number 6 is have a reward when you're done. This one's really big for me. Anytime I do a cold run, I try and go right to the hot tub when I'm done. If you don't have a hot tub, you could do a sauna at your gym, or you could just do a hot shower. This is one of those things when you're on your last mile or two and you're really cold, your hands hurt, your face hurts, your eyes are watering, and then it freezes. Everything that's going on, and you can just like mentally be ready for like a shower or the hot tub. It actually really does make a difference. If you don't have access to any of that, then I don't know, just run because you love it. Number 7 is practice cold exposure. This is something I did to get ready. If you're not running in the fall when it's a little bit cold and you're just jumping into cold weather running, something you could do is you could take either cold showers or take ice baths. Doesn't sound very fun, practice cold exposure by getting super cold, but to prepare for my 10-mile race, what I did was I got in ice baths for a couple weeks before that, and I got to the point where mentally I'm like, if I can sit in water that's 34 degrees for 3 minutes, surely I can run for about an hour or so when it's 36 or 37 degrees. So mentally you kind of feel like you can definitely do it because you've already survived the shock of super cold water. My last tip, number 8, is pace yourself and keep it short. Not every outdoor run you're doing has to be a PR. It doesn't have to be the longest distance you've ever ran. You could just go outside and run 2 or 3 or 4 miles and just keep those as your shorter runs. If you don't love cold weather running, and a lot of people don't, it's not very popular. If you do a maintenance amount of miles per week and you run those miles consistently through the winter, you're still gonna be in really good shape come springtime. That way you've already ran all those miles, so you feel like you're up to pace. That is the end of all the tips that I have for you guys. I hope you got something from this video. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just kind of sharing what I've learned as I go through this running journey. I'm also a very new YouTube channel, so I've only made so many videos, so I don't have a lot of stuff out there, but I'm just kind of getting into it and really trying to take this more seriously. So if you guys liked the video or you got something, maybe consider liking and subscribing. And if any of these tips stuck out to you or you have any extra tips, leave them down in the comments below so we can kind of build up this community of runners, all kind of giving each other information and sharing what we learned. Also, drinking iced coffee, bonus tip, will actually make you run better in the winter. That's a fact. This is indeed the end of the video. So here we go. I'm gonna shut the camera off. I'm not gonna do one of those weird endings where I'm like, boom, and it ends. I'm just gonna turn the camera off. So thank you for watching. Here we go.